They say the woods are full of secrets, but there's one secret they never warn you about. One that, if you're unlucky enough to discover, will change everything you thought you knew about the world around you. It all started on a cold, quiet night in a sleepy little town. Alex, a reclusive artist, was doing what he always did, working late into the night. His monitor burning his eyes as he tried to finish another project. But tonight was different. He stepped outside for a late-night soda run, expecting the usual quiet, empty streets. But the store was still open, even though it was well past midnight. Something was wrong. When he walked inside, he saw him, a man at the counter. His name tag read Jeremy, but there was something about him. The way his body moved in jerky, unnatural motions. The way his eyes stayed hidden, never meeting Alex's gaze. The way his hand snapped unnaturally when he reached for the cash register. Alex thought it was just a strange man. But he was wrong, because there are things that wear human skin, pretending to be us, mimicking everything we do, and they've been here long before we realized it. And now, Alex's world was about to crumble into chaos. Because what he didn't know was that he had just crossed paths with something that had no business being in this world. And soon, it would be hunting him down. What Alex discovered was far worse than anything he could have imagined. And once you learn the truth, there's no turning back. The things that lurk in the woods aren't just legends. They are real, and if you aren't careful, you'll never make it out alive. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us here on Whispers in the Dark. Your support keeps the nightmares alive. And with your help, we can bring you even more chilling tales. Don't miss out. The darkness is waiting. There's a quiet kind of terror that comes with being alone in the dead of night. The kind where the world outside feels as though it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. For Alex, a digital artist who thrived on the solitude of the nighttime, it was the perfect time to work. The silence of his apartment, broken only by the rhythmic clack of his keyboard, made the world feel far away, distant, and safe. But tonight was different. Alex had lived in the small, sleepy town of Winters Hollow for nearly 2 years now, nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. The streets were quiet, the stars seemed brighter than anywhere else, and time had a way of moving slower, like the town itself was suspended in some forgotten moment. The corner store owned by George and Martha Clark had been a staple of the neighborhood for as long as anyone could remember. It was small, a little rundown, but it had character. Alex had spent countless nights walking there for snacks and soda, never once thinking anything out of the ordinary was afoot. But tonight, something was different. It was just past midnight when Alex realized he'd run out of soda. A small inconvenience, but one that needed fixing. He pulled on his jacket, grabbed his keys, and stepped out into the crisp night air. The streets were empty. The silence was almost suffocating. It was as though the town itself was asleep. As he approached the store, the faint glow of the neon open sign caught his attention. Odd, the Clarks had never kept the shop open this late before. Alex's curiosity got the better of him, and he changed his direction, heading toward the store. The night air was biting, but it didn't matter. He just needed a bottle of soda. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. A tall figure stood behind the counter, hunched over with his elbows resting on the wood. His name tag read Jeremy. Alex blinked in surprise. He didn't recognize this person. It was odd, considering this was a small town and everyone knew each other. Maybe he was a new hire. Still, there was something unsettling about the man. He was massive, towering above the counter in a way that seemed unnatural. His hair was black, greasy, falling over his eyes, and he didn't seem to notice Alex's arrival at all. Alex didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was just tired. Or perhaps the man was lost in his own thoughts. But something about the way he was sitting, slumped, like he was being weighed down by some invisible burden, gave Alex a strange chill. "Ah hey," Alex said, breaking the silence. "Just need a bottle of Coke." The man didn't respond. Alex grabbed a medium bottle and placed it on the counter, his eyes lingering on the figure in front of him. He pulled out a $10 bill and placed it on the counter. "You need change?" Alex asked, his voice a little unsure. The man's head snapped up, but his movements were stiff and jerky, like a puppet on strings. His eyes were hidden behind his long hair, but the slight tilt of his head made Alex feel like he was being watched. The man grunted in response, the sound guttural and odd. Alex stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what was happening. The man's arm moved, but not in a natural way. It jerked, a sharp, quick motion, as if a bear trap was closing. Alex's stomach tightened in response, his heart beginning to race. His brain struggled to make sense of it. It wasn't just the odd behavior. It was the way his movements seemed wrong, inhuman. Alex's eyes widened as he realized it wasn't just fatigue playing tricks on him. This man, this thing, wasn't normal. Jeremy fumbled for the change, the awkwardness of the motion unsettling. It was almost like he was trying to act human but failing at it miserably. He pushed the change across the counter with slow, deliberate motions, his face still hidden by his unkempt hair. "Thanks," Alex muttered, his throat tight, his mind reeling. He grabbed the change and the bottle, turning quickly to leave. He could feel the man's eyes on him as he walked away, the atmosphere thick with an oppressive sense of wrongness. Alex pushed open the door and stepped back into the cold night. He glanced back one more time, half expecting the strange figure to be gone. But Jeremy remained there, slouched, motionless behind the counter. The only movement was the rise and fall of his chest. A deep, slow breath that made Alex shiver. He hurried back to his apartment, his steps quickening as he neared the building. Something didn't sit right in his gut. The image of the man, or whatever he was, stayed with him. The way his arm snapped to the cash register, the way his eyes never seemed to meet Alex's. It felt wrong. Inside his apartment, Alex placed the soda on his desk and tried to shake off the feeling of dread creeping up his spine. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He sat at his computer, trying to focus on work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the store, to Jeremy, to that thing. It was just a man. Right, just a man doing his job. Alex tried to convince himself, but deep down, he knew he was lying. Something wasn't right, and that feeling gnawed at him, refusing to let go. And when Alex looked out the window, his heart skipped a beat. The lights at the store were still on, still glowing in the dark. As his gaze lingered on the store, he saw the figure again, standing motionless in the window, staring directly at him. A cold shiver ran down his spine. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was real, and whatever Jeremy was, whatever was happening in this quiet little town, it was far from over. The next few days felt like they stretched into an endless, suffocating fog. Every time Alex closed his eyes, Jeremy's unsettling figure was there, etched into his mind like a scar that wouldn't heal. It wasn't just the store. It wasn't just the strange way Jeremy moved. No, it was the feeling. That feeling. Something was wrong. It started with small things, easy to dismiss at first. Alex began hearing sounds late at night. Footsteps, light tapping, almost rhythmic. But when he would turn his head to check, the noise would stop. His apartment was empty, the streets quiet, the world still. No one was there. The sound of someone whispering his name, too faint to be sure, just at the edge of his hearing. Sometimes, it would come from the corner of his room, other times from behind him. But each time, when Alex turned, there was nothing. That was when the nightmares started. At first, it was subtle. Jeremy, or whatever it was pretending to be Jeremy, appeared in his dreams, standing motionless in the corner of his bedroom. His face, hidden by that greasy hair, would slowly tilt toward Alex. His body would jerk unnaturally, like a marionette, and in the silence, Alex could hear the sound of his bones popping as his arm moved. Then, the nightmares began to shift. The face of Jeremy would contort, stretch, as if something beneath the skin was trying to break free. Alex would scream, but his voice would be drowned out by the wet, fleshy sound of tearing skin. The dream would always end with that deep, guttural growl, that sound that vibrated through Alex's bones, making him shiver even in his sleep. When Alex woke up, He would be soaked in sweat. His body rigid, his heart pounding. The real terror came when he left his apartment. It was a sunny morning when Alex went for his usual walk to clear his head. The town was eerily calm. The streets so still that it almost felt as though time had stopped altogether. He tried to brush off the creeping unease, trying to convince himself it was all in his head. Maybe he was just overthinking things. But then, as he passed the corner store, he froze. The door was wide open. The lights were still on, even though the clerks should have been closed by now. And there, standing behind the counter, was Jeremy. Alex's blood ran cold as he stood in the middle of the street, staring at the man, or whatever he was. Jeremy's eyes were hidden as usual, but now, his posture was even more unnatural. He was slouched low, almost to the point of collapsing on the counter. His hands were twitching and jerking, like they were struggling to hold onto something, to keep themselves together. Alex wanted to move, but his legs were frozen in place. Then, as though sensing Alex's gaze, Jeremy slowly lifted his head. The world seemed to freeze as Alex locked eyes with him, or rather, with the empty space where his eyes should have been. His face, pale and twisted, stared back at him, an unsettling grin creeping across his lips. A grin that wasn't quite human. Before Alex could move, Jeremy's arm snapped out toward the counter in one swift, jerky motion, the sound of his bones crackling in a way that made Alex's stomach churn. His fingers curled around a bottle of soda on the counter as if they didn't quite belong to him. The movement was wrong. It was a trap, a machine trying to mimic life. It was a grotesque imitation of humanity. "Are you all right?" Jeremy's voice broke the silence. But it wasn't Jeremy's voice. It was deep, distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far, far away, like it wasn't human at all. Alex's mouth went dry. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The air in the store felt thicker now, suffocating. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long across the walls, as if the building itself was watching him. Alex wanted to turn and run, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from the thing standing behind the counter. It wasn't Jeremy, it was something else, something pretending to be Jeremy. A scream bubbled up from deep within his chest. But before he could release it, the door swung open, and an older woman walked in, Martha Clark, the store owner. "Jeremy, get that soda stocked, will you?" she said, her voice sweet and casual, as though nothing was wrong. Jeremy, or whatever it was, snapped to attention, straightening unnaturally fast. The motion was so sudden and violent that it looked as if his spine might snap. "Why, yeah, sure," he muttered in a voice that sounded like it had been rehearsed. Martha didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. She smiled at Alex and waved him over to the counter. "Good morning, dear, just getting your usual." The words didn't feel real. The store felt like a dream, or a nightmare. Alex could feel his pulse in his ears. His thoughts jumbled, spinning out of control. "This wasn't right. I was just leaving," Alex stammered, his body moving on autopilot as he turned and walked quickly to the door. As he stepped outside, the air felt thick, heavy. His breath came out in short, panicked bursts, and his hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone. He had to leave. He couldn't stay here anymore. He had to get out. Alex couldn't shake the feeling as he walked home, the pressure in his chest growing tighter with each step. Something was wrong with the town. Something was wrong with the people. He didn't know what had happened to Jeremy, but he knew one thing for certain: Jeremy was no longer human. And if there was one thing Alex knew, it was that he was not the only one. Something in the air, in the town itself, was changing. The more he looked, the more he could see it. There were others. Alex's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He pulled it out, his hands shaking. It was a text from his friend. "Peter, hey man, you good? You've been acting weird lately." He typed back quickly, trying to push away the fear rising in his chest. "Yeah. Just some weird stuff going on." But before he could hit send, a notification popped up from his bank. A withdrawal notification. At 2:42 a.m. $50 was withdrawn from your account at Clark's Corner Store. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The store had never charged his account. And then the realization hit him like a slap in the face. He never paid for the soda. Alex barely slept that night. Every time his eyes closed, the image of Jeremy's twisted, grinning face flashed in his mind. The silence of the town felt more suffocating, more oppressive, like the air itself was thick with secrets. He couldn't shake the feeling that the world around him was slowly slipping out of focus, warping into something dark, something unnatural. He had to know what was going on. The town, the people, the strange happenings, everything was connected, and he was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant venturing into the one place he had been trying to avoid for days, the woods. The dense trees stood like dark sentinels, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. Alex had never really thought much about the forest. It was just there, a backdrop to the quiet little town of Winter's Hollow. But after what had happened with Jeremy, after seeing the grotesque way he moved, Alex couldn't help but feel that the forest held something dark within it. Something that had been there long before he arrived. It was nearly dawn when he made the decision. The air was sharp, biting, as Alex stood at the edge of the forest, his breath coming out in clouds of mist. The town was still asleep, its streets silent and empty. The only sound was the rustling of leaves as the wind whispered through the trees. He had no plan, no clear idea of what he was looking for, but something deep inside him told him that the answers lay somewhere in those woods. Somewhere hidden from view. The deeper Alex walked, the thicker the trees became. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, darker, and the further he ventured, the more he felt like the forest was closing in on him. As if it were alive, watching. The path grew narrower, the branches overhead tangling together like skeletal fingers. Alex paused, scanning the woods around him. It felt like he was being watched. His heart beat faster, his senses heightened. Every snap of a twig beneath his feet seemed louder than the last. Every rustle in the bushes felt like something following him. He took a deep breath, pushing the unease aside, but the sense of dread only grew stronger as he pushed forward. Deeper into the forest. That's when he heard it. A low, guttural growl. It wasn't animalistic, more like a sound coming from deep within the earth itself. A growl that rattled his bones. Alex froze, his body rigid with fear. He turned slowly, looking into the darkness between the trees. At first, he saw nothing, just the shadowy trunks of the pines and the flickering light that barely touched the forest floor. But then, there, between two massive oaks, a shape moved. At first, it was just a shadow, a ripple in the darkness. But then it took form. A figure, tall, bending unnaturally low, almost crawling on all fours, like it was trying to mimic the movement of an animal. Its body was unnervingly twisted, its limbs far too long, too gangly. It moved in a jerky, broken manner, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled by an invisible hand. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled backward, his breath catching in his throat. This thing wasn't human. It couldn't be. The way it moved, the way its body jerked and contorted, it was a thing of nightmares. Something that shouldn't exist. The figure froze, its head snapping up toward Alex. He could barely make out its face, but what he could see sent a cold chill down his spine. The skin was stretched tight, pale and sickly, the eyes hollow and empty, like two dark voids staring into his soul. A twisted, jagged grin spread across its face, stretching far too wide to be natural. Before Alex could react, the creature let out a guttural screech, a sound that vibrated through the air like nails on a chalkboard. It echoed in the forest, sending a wave of terror crashing over Alex. His instincts kicked in, and he turned, running as fast as he could, his heart hammering in his chest. His legs burned, but he couldn't stop. The forest seemed to close in around him, the branches reaching out like claws, threatening to pull him in. Every step felt like he was running through thick mud, like the ground itself was holding him back. Behind him, the creature followed. Its movement was unnatural, fluid in a way that made Alex's stomach churn. It was gaining on him, faster than it should have been possible. A snap of a twig, A low growl. It was close now. Alex could hear its breathing, heavy, ragged, like something was breathing through the air itself. And then, suddenly, there was a figure in front of him, blocking his path. It was another one, just like the first. Alex's pulse raced as his brain scrambled to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around him. Two of them, two grotesque figures, standing in the heart of the forest, staring at him with those hollow eyes. He was trapped. "Help!" Alex screamed, his voice shaking, but the words felt hollow, as if the forest itself had swallowed him up. No one would hear him. The creatures were closing in, their limbs twisting as they moved, and Alex could hear them whispering, their voices low and garbled, like the wind was speaking through them. It was a language he couldn't understand, but he could feel its malice. And then, in the midst of his terror, something shifted in the air. A crackling sound, like electricity charging the atmosphere, filled the forest. The creatures froze, their heads snapping toward something in the distance. And then, as if sensing something far greater than themselves, they began to retreat, slowly at first, then faster, until they disappeared into the shadows of the trees. Alex stood there, his body trembling, his mind spinning. What the hell had just happened? He didn't have time to think. He ran, faster than he had ever run before, sprinting through the woods, feeling like the darkness itself was chasing him. He didn't stop until he was back at the edge of the forest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The trees were silent now, still, but the forest had left its mark on him. Alex looked back one last time, his eyes searching the dark silhouettes of the trees. There, in the distance, just beyond the reach of the light, he saw them again, the creatures, watching, waiting, and that's when he realized something terrifying. The woods weren't just full of secrets. The secrets were alive. Alex's breath was still shallow as he stumbled back into the familiar comfort of his apartment. The eerie silence of the night had never felt so suffocating, and his body was buzzing with adrenaline. He had escaped, but the forest, the creatures, the things, he couldn't shake them. They had been real, they were still real, and worse, they were out there. The clock on the wall ticked away the hours, but the passage of time felt irrelevant. The night had shifted for Alex. It had gone from ordinary to something unspeakable, a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. And as the adrenaline began to wear off, the dread seeped in deeper. It wasn't just the things he'd seen. It was the feeling that the town he'd known, the place he'd lived in for years, was slipping into a grotesque parody of itself. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even himself. But there was one person, one figure in his life, who seemed to be at the center of it all, the one who'd set everything in motion, the one who was hiding something dark. Jeremy. The more Alex thought about the encounter at the store, the more he realized how wrong it had felt. Jeremy hadn't just been a strange man behind the counter, he had been something else. Something inhuman. Alex's mind kept returning to that grin, that twisted expression that stretched far too wide for a human face. He had seen it before. In the forest, the creatures he had run from had worn the same expression. It was like Jeremy had been an illusion, a facade. But who or what had been behind the mask? Alex couldn't ignore it anymore. He needed answers, and if Jeremy was the key to understanding what was happening in Winter's Hollow, then Alex would find him. The following day, Alex returned to the corner store. The weight of his decision hung heavily on his shoulders as he walked the empty streets, the sun casting long shadows on the ground. There was an odd stillness in the air, a thick, oppressive silence that seemed to follow him wherever he went. As he entered the store, the familiar bell above the door chimed. But this time, the sound felt wrong. It echoed in a hollow way, as if the store itself had become a mausoleum for something long dead. George and Martha were nowhere to be seen, and for a brief moment, Alex thought he might be alone. But then he saw Jeremy. He was standing behind the counter, just like before. But this time, Alex was prepared. His nerves were taut, his senses on high alert as he approached the counter. Jeremy didn't look up at first, his eyes hidden beneath the thick strands of greasy hair. His body was slouched again, his arms hanging limply by his sides, like he was waiting for something, or someone, to take control of him. But this time, Alex didn't hesitate. He stepped closer to the counter, his heart racing in his chest. He couldn't afford to be afraid anymore. He needed to know. He needed to see the truth. "Jeremy," Alex said, his voice shaking, but firm. "What are you?" For a moment, there was no response. The store seemed to grow colder, the air thick with the scent of something old and decaying. Then, Jeremy's head snapped up. The movement was sharp, unnatural, like a marionette pulled by strings. His eyes, once hidden, were now visible, but they weren't the eyes of a man. They were dark, hollow pits, void of life. The skin around them was pale, almost sickly, and the darkness within him seemed to absorb the light around him. There was no humanity in them. Alex took a step back, his pulse spiking, but Jeremy didn't speak. Instead, he smiled, his lips curling into a twisted grin. The smile was jagged, like a predator showing its teeth. And the more Alex stared at it, the more it seemed to stretch. It was like the skin couldn't contain the smile, like it was ripping at the seams. "Not what you expected," Jeremy's voice rasped, as though it hadn't been used in years. Alex could barely breathe. The sound of Jeremy's voice was wrong, too. It wasn't human. It was a low, gravelly echo, like a being that had been trapped in the darkness for centuries. But it was still familiar. It was like a twisted mockery of the people he had known all his life. Alex's heart hammered in his chest as he stepped back, his mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. "You're not Jeremy, are you?" The thing behind the counter didn't answer. Instead, it took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring Alex's fear. The air around them grew thick, suffocating, and Alex could feel the temperature in the room drop. The very walls of the store seemed to close in around him. Jeremy, or whatever this thing was, leaned forward, his smile widening, impossibly wide. "We don't have names," it whispered. "Not anymore." Alex's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. This was no ordinary person. This was something else, something that had taken Jeremy's body and was now wearing it like a suit. But the suit was falling apart, the edges starting to fray and tear at the seams. And as the thing in front of him began to twitch, jerk, and contort unnaturally, Alex knew it wasn't just one person. It was the thing that had been following him, the thing that had been hiding in plain sight, feeding on the town, wearing the skins of those who had gone missing. "You're one of them," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. The thing smiled again. This time, it wasn't just its lips that stretched wide. Its entire face split, the skin tearing open with a sickening sound, revealing the twisted, dark flesh beneath. The creature's eyes burned into Alex, and for a brief moment, Alex saw something, a glimpse of something dark, a truth he couldn't deny. This thing wasn't alone. It had been here for years, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. It wasn't just Jeremy, it was everyone, and in that moment, Alex knew the terrifying truth: the town of Winter's Hollow was already lost. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us here on Whispers in the Dark. Your support keeps the nightmares alive, and with your help, we can bring you even more chilling tales. Don't miss out. The darkness is waiting. Alex stumbled back into his apartment, his mind racing with terror, his heart pounding in his chest. The encounter at the store had shattered something deep inside him, something fragile that he hadn't even known existed. He couldn't think, he couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, suffocating, as though the very walls of the apartment were pressing in on him. He hadn't been imagining it. The things he'd seen, the grinning, hollow-eyed monster wearing Jeremy's skin, it was real. And it wasn't just one. It was everywhere. They were everywhere. His mind reeled with the horror of it all. The twisted smile, the unnatural way Jeremy had moved, the sickening sense that something was wrong with the very air in the room. It all crashed down on him, drowning him in a flood of panic and dread. He grabbed his phone from the desk, dialing Peter's number with trembling fingers. His mind screamed at him to reach out, to tell someone what was happening. But when the phone rang, The voice that picked up on the other end was not Peter's. It was distorted. The voice was low, guttural, and something in Alex's chest twisted painfully when he heard it. It almost sounded like Peter but off. It was wrong. "Peter, is that you?" Alex whispered, his voice shaking with the fear that was slowly consuming him. A long pause on the other end. "Alex," the voice croaked, "you need to get out of there. Now." Alex's heart skipped a beat. His hands were sweating as he held the phone tightly. "Peter, what the hell is going on? I saw it. I saw Jeremy." "No. Not Jeremy, something else. Something wearing his skin. I'm not crazy. Peter, you've got to believe me." There was a long silence on the other end. And then the voice spoke again. Its tone dark and foreboding. "Alex, you don't know what you're dealing with. There's no way out of this. Not unless you understand what's really happening. The town, the people, they've been taken. They're not human anymore. They never were. And you've seen too much." Alex's pulse quickened. He could feel his mind slipping into a panic. But he forced himself to stay calm, to focus. He had to know what was going on. He had to understand. "I don't care what it takes. Peter, you have to tell me what's happening. Why is this happening? What are they?" There was another pause, a long one. "They're called Skinwalkers," Peter's voice whispered. "Creatures that wear the skin of humans to survive. They take their form, their memories, their voices, and once they've worn enough skins, they can mimic us perfectly. They can pass as normal, as if nothing's changed, but inside, they're empty. They're soulless." Alex's mind was spinning. He felt like he was drowning in the horror of it all. The very idea of these things. These monsters hiding in plain sight. Wearing the skins of his friends. His family. People he knew. It made his stomach churn. "I saw one," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. "I saw Jeremy or whatever it was. It had no eyes. Its face, God, it was like it was falling apart." Peter's voice on the other end grew colder, more urgent. "They're not like us. They've been around for centuries, hidden in plain sight, feeding on humanity, and they never stop. They never leave." Alex could hear the desperation in Peter's voice, a sense of finality that sent a chill running down his spine. "Peter, what can I do? How do I stop them?" "You can't, not alone." The words hit Alex like a slap in the face. And for a moment, he couldn't breathe. He had to stop them. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and let the town, his town, fall to these things. Peter's voice cut through the panic in his head. "You need to leave. You need to get out of Winter's Hollow. If you stay, they'll find you, and when they do, they'll take you. I'm not even sure I'll be safe anymore. They know I've been trying to stop them. I'm not going anywhere until I find a way to stop this." Alex said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I can't run. I can't leave. I have to fight. I have to save this town." Peter's voice cracked with sorrow. "It's already too late. You've seen too much. They'll be coming for you soon." Alex's breath caught in his throat. The line went dead. The darkness in the room felt heavier now, suffocating Alex with each passing second. He couldn't run. Not from this. He couldn't let these things win. A sound outside his apartment window made him jump. A scraping sound. A soft scritch against the glass. His breath hitched. No, 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 no. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to face whatever was out there. But his body betrayed him. Slowly, hesitantly, he turned toward the window. And there, standing in the shadow, just outside of his view, was a figure. It was too tall, too thin, the limbs were long, unnaturally so, and it was staring at him. Alex felt his heart stop in his chest. It was wearing a human face, a man's face. Someone he recognized. It was George Clark, the store owner, but his face, God, his face, was hollow. There were no eyes, just dark, empty sockets. His mouth twisted into a grin, wide and unnatural, like something far worse than human had taken control. Alex's legs shook as he stumbled backward, his breath ragged. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. The thing, George, raised a hand. The fingers unnaturally long, pointing directly at Alex. The skin on its face stretched further, and Alex could almost hear the bones breaking, the flesh twisting. A low, raspy voice filled the room, a voice that was far too deep to be human. "You can't hide forever," the thing outside chuckled, a harsh, bone-rattling sound that shook Alex to his core. It wasn't George anymore, it was something else. The creature turned and disappeared into the shadows, melting into the night as if it was never there. Alex stood there, his body frozen with terror. He knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. He had no idea what he was dealing with, no idea how to fight it. But he had to try. He had to fight back. Because if he didn't, they would win, they would take everything. The next few hours were a blur of adrenaline and dread. Alex couldn't think clearly. He kept seeing the grinning, hollow face of George, its empty eyes staring back at him in his mind's eye. Every sound outside his apartment, every creak in the floorboards, felt like a warning. They were out there, waiting for him. The only thing Alex could do was gather his thoughts. He had to find out more. He needed to understand who the Skinwalkers were, how they worked, and why Winter's Hollow had become their hunting ground. But as he began to write down everything he knew, every encounter, every strange thing he'd seen, he realized the terrifying truth. There were more of them than he could count. They were everywhere, and soon, they would come for him. Alex's world was unrecognizable. After the terrifying encounter with George's empty face outside his window, the entire town felt like a ghost town. The silence was oppressive, heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. No one was talking, no one was acting like they used to. The streets were empty, the shops were quiet, people moved like shadows, distant, hollow, almost as though they were fading away. But Alex knew the truth. The town wasn't asleep, it was dying, and it wasn't just Winter's Hollow. It was everything. The creatures, the Skinwalkers, they were spreading, infecting, wearing the faces of those who had once been part of the community. The more Alex thought about it, the more certain he became. It wasn't just about this place. It was about everyone. The first step was clear. He had to find the source. He couldn't just sit and wait for them to find him. He needed answers. He needed to understand what they were, where they came from, and, most importantly, how to stop them. But there was only one way to do that. He had to go into the heart of the darkness. The woods were where it had all begun. The creatures, the unsettling things hiding in plain sight, were connected to the forest. Alex was sure of it. There had to be something there. Something buried in the heart of the trees that held the key to the nightmare that was unraveling around him. That night, under the sickly glow of a waning moon, Alex armed himself. He grabbed a flashlight, a hunting knife, anything he thought might help. His fingers trembled as he packed his bag, the weight of what he was about to do pressing heavily on his chest. Every instinct told him to turn back, to flee while he still could. But he couldn't, not when the truth was just beyond his reach. He made his way toward the woods, every step feeling heavier than the last. The forest loomed ahead, dark and silent, as though it was waiting for him. There was no sound, no birds, no wind rustling the leaves, just the oppressive silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Alex's heart pounded as he walked deeper into the woods, the shadows seeming to swallow him whole. He couldn't see much of anything beyond the beam of his flashlight. But he could feel it. He could feel them. They were watching. The ground beneath his feet was soft, damp, and the trees towered over him like ancient giants. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the air became. It was thick, saturated with something dark and unnatural. The sense of being watched grew stronger with every step. The hairs on the back of Alex's neck stood on end, and his stomach twisted into knots. He wasn't alone. He could feel it, the presence of something, or someone, just beyond his sight, the crack of a branch, the soft shuffle of footsteps in the distance, the flicker of a shadow in the corner of his eye. It was them, the Skinwalkers. He could feel their hunger. Alex's grip tightened on the flashlight, his pulse quickening. He couldn't turn back now. The only way to survive was to face them head-on, to confront whatever nightmare had taken root in these woods. The path narrowed, and the trees seemed to close in around him. It was harder to breathe. His chest tightened with every step. And the flashlight flickered erratically. Something wasn't right. Something was pulling at him, urging him forward, deeper into the forest. His instincts screamed at him to stop, to run, but he couldn't. He had to know. He couldn't explain it. It wasn't just the fear that gripped him. It was the feeling of something else. Something far darker, drawing him closer to the heart of the woods. Suddenly, there was a sound, a rustling in the underbrush, a soft scraping noise. Alex froze, his breath catching in his throat. Then he heard it, a voice, a low, guttural whisper that sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't in a language he could understand. But it didn't matter. He could feel the malice behind it, the hunger. They were close now. Alex's mind raced. He wasn't ready. He didn't know what to do, what to expect. All he had were a few basic supplies and his fear. But he couldn't back down. Not now. Not when the truth was right in front of him. The shadows around him shifted, warping, flickering. The trees seemed to move, their branches twisting in unnatural ways, reaching for him. And then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs long and twisted, its face obscured by shadow. The air around it seemed to warp, bend, as if it were not fully bound to this world. Alex's breath caught in his throat as the figure stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. It didn't walk, it floated, gliding toward him as if the ground beneath it was nothing more than an illusion. The thing's face slowly emerged from the darkness, and Alex felt his blood run cold. It wasn't just one of the Skinwalkers. It was a leader, the one pulling the strings. Its face was a grotesque blend of human features and something else. The skin was pale and stretched too thin, the eyes hollow voids that sucked in the light around them. Its mouth was a jagged grin, its lips cracked and bloody, as if it hadn't eaten in days or years. Its teeth were yellow, sharp, and pointed, like the fangs of a predator. The creature's eyes locked onto Alex's, and in that instant, time seemed to slow. It was looking at him, not with curiosity, but with recognition, as if it knew exactly who he was, as if it had been waiting for him. Its lips curled into a sickening smile. And then, it spoke. It didn't use words. Instead, it projected a feeling, a message directly into Alex's mind. "You should not have come," it said, its voice inside his head, resonating with an ancient, horrifying power. "You cannot stop what has already begun." Alex's heart raced as the creature advanced, its limbs jerking unnaturally as it closed the distance between them. Every instinct told him to run, to get as far away from this thing as possible. But his legs felt heavy, like they were trapped in concrete. His breath came in short gasps, his chest tightening with the pressure of fear. The creature stopped just inches from him, its grotesque face inches from his own. It reached out, one of its long fingers brushing Alex's cheek. And he felt a coldness so deep it was as if it had frozen his very soul. He wanted to scream, to fight, but his voice was gone. His body wouldn't obey. The creature's grin widened, and Alex could feel its sharp breath on his skin. Then it whispered, its voice like the scrape of nails on glass. "You are already ours." The darkness closed in, swallowing everything around Alex. He was trapped, surrounded by the creatures of his nightmares. Unable to move, unable to breathe. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for his very soul. And he realized, in that moment, that the woods weren't just haunted by these things. The woods were them, and there was no escape. The cold air inside the forest was suffocating, as if the very atmosphere had turned against him. Alex stood there, his legs trembling, his body rigid with terror as the creature loomed before him. The ground beneath his feet felt unstable, like the earth itself was warping, shifting, and bending in response to its presence. His breath was shallow, his heart beating faster than it ever had before, a relentless drum in his ears. But it was not just the creature. It was what the creature represented. Everything that was happening around him, the town, the people, the horrors wearing the faces of those he had known, had been leading to this moment. The realization hit him with full force. This was not an isolated incident. This was not a chance encounter. This was a movement, a force, a plan set in motion long before Alex ever arrived in Winter's Hollow. The thing standing before him, its body stretched and twisted unnaturally, its movements jerking and erratic, was not a creature of instinct. It was a predator, a hunter, and it knew exactly what it was doing. But it wasn't just hunting for food. It was hunting for something deeper, something that couldn't be measured or defined, something other. The creature grinned, the jagged, wide smile splitting its face. Its lips cracked as if it had been unable to move them for centuries. And the sound of its mouth opening was a wet, grotesque rip that made Alex's stomach churn. It stepped closer, its long, pale fingers reaching out toward him. Each step it took seemed to distort the very fabric of reality. As if the world around Alex was bending, stretching, and warping under the weight of its presence. "You are not like the others," the creature whispered, its voice like a low, guttural hum in the back of his skull. It wasn't speaking in a language Alex could understand. But somehow, the meaning of its words came through loud and clear. "You are not one of them. You are different, and I will make you see it." Alex's heart skipped a beat as the words rang in his mind. Different? What did that mean? What was it trying to say? It reached out again, its fingers curling like claws, inches away from his skin. Alex could feel the cold radiating off its touch, a chill that dug deep into his bones. He knew if it touched him, he would be lost. He would become just like the others. Just like Jeremy, just like the countless faces of people he had once trusted, now replaced by hollow, soulless things. He wasn't going to let that happen. He couldn't, with every ounce of strength he had. Alex took a step back, the flashlight in his hand trembling as he aimed it directly at the creature's face. The light seemed to have no effect, passing right through the darkness, failing to reach it. The creature's grin widened even more, stretching beyond what seemed possible, as though its face could tear in half. Then, suddenly, Alex felt the ground beneath him shift. It was as if the earth had turned into quicksand. The trees around him began to bend, their trunks groaning under the pressure of an invisible force. The forest itself was reacting to the creature's presence. The branches above him seemed to writhe, twisting like serpents, their gnarled fingers clawing at the sky. Before he could react, a shrill, spine-chilling scream ripped through the forest, echoing off the trees. It wasn't the creature's voice. It wasn't even human. The scream sounded wrong, twisted, like a chorus of multiple voices layered on top of one another, each one distorted and grotesque. Alex's mind raced, his thoughts scattered in 1,000 different directions. He had to run. He couldn't face this thing alone. He didn't have the power to fight it. But even as his legs screamed at him to turn and flee, his body refused to move. It was like his feet were glued to the ground, held in place by something far more powerful than fear. Then, through the tangled branches and the shadows, Alex saw movement. Figures, shapes, appeared, emerging from the darkness. The Skinwalkers. They were here. They were coming for him. The creatures emerged from the shadows, their twisted bodies contorting in ways that were impossible to understand. Their limbs stretched unnaturally long, their faces distorted with hunger, their hollow eyes watching him, staring into him with an emptiness that seemed to reach into his very soul. The air around them shimmered with a thick, unnatural heat, as if the space itself was warping under their presence. Alex's mind screamed at him to run, but his legs still wouldn't move. He was trapped in a nightmare, a labyrinth of horrors that had no end. Every time he thought he saw a way out, more creatures appeared, their grotesque forms crowding in on him. their eyes gleaming with malevolent hunger. And then, in the midst of the madness, Alex saw something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't the creatures. It wasn't the forest. It was the figure standing at the back of the crowd of skinwalkers, watching him with an intensity that made Alex's chest tighten. It was Peter, or rather, what was left of him. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Peter, his friend, his ally, was standing there. His eyes hollow, his face pale, his skin stretched tight over his bones. He had the same twisted grin that the creatures wore. But it wasn't just his face. His entire body was wrong. It was like Peter had been replaced. Like his body had been hijacked by something far more ancient. Far more powerful. No, it couldn't be Peter. It wasn't Peter. It was something else entirely. Something wearing his skin. Peter's empty eyes locked onto Alex's, and the grin on his face grew wider, stretching until it seemed to take over his entire face. Then the creatures stepped forward, moving as one, their bodies jerking and twitching with every step they took. Their hollow eyes fixed on Alex, and the air around them seemed to thicken, suffocating him, as though the forest itself was closing in. The trees groaned, the ground trembled, and Alex could feel the very earth beneath him shaking. Peter, or whatever it was, stepped forward, his body moving unnaturally, like a puppet on strings. It reached out toward Alex, its hand twitching in the air as if it were about to grab him, to drag him into the darkness. The creatures surrounding Alex closed in. The darkness, the creatures, and the whispers that echoed through his mind all became one overwhelming force. "Join us," Peter's voice echoed, but it wasn't Peter's voice. It was deeper, thicker, filled with an ancient malevolence. "Become one with us." Alex's chest tightened with panic. His mind screamed for him to fight back, to do anything to escape. But his body felt paralyzed. He couldn't move, he couldn't breathe. All he could do was stare into the abyss that was slowly swallowing him whole. And then, as the creatures began to close in, Alex felt a coldness, a sudden bite of something sharp, something cruel, digging into his skin. The skinwalkers had come for him. And this time, there was no escape. Alex felt the weight of the darkness pressing in around him. The air was thick, almost suffocating, with a malevolent energy that made it hard to breathe. He was no longer sure if he was standing on solid ground or if the earth beneath him had become something else entirely, something wrong. Warped, distorted. The forest around him was alive, its twisted trees leaning in close, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands reaching for him. The figure of Peter, or what had once been Peter, was still there, standing in the distance, watching him with hollow, empty eyes. The thing that wore his face had long ago shed any resemblance to the friend Alex had once known. It was no longer human. But it still looked at him. It still knew him. "You've seen too much, Alex," the creature said, its voice low and guttural, a distorted mockery of Peter's familiar tone. "You're no longer part of their world. You belong to us now." The words resonated in Alex's mind, curling around him like a noose tightening with every breath he took. He could feel the pulse of something ancient, something dark, growing stronger with every passing second. The air hummed with an unnatural energy, an energy that seemed to seep into his bones and warp his thoughts. He tried to move, but his legs refused to obey. His body was frozen in place, held by the invisible grip of fear and the creatures that surrounded him. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to fight, to do anything to escape. But there was no escape. Not from them, not from this. The skinwalkers moved in closer, their forms flickering in and out of the shadows like mirages, their twisted, contorted bodies bending at unnatural angles, their hollow eyes locked onto Alex, their lips curling into grotesque smiles. Each step they took seemed to distort the very fabric of reality around him. The air thick with their presence. They were closing in, slowly but steadily, And Alex knew they were toying with him. To them, this was a game, but to Alex, it was a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. One of the creatures stepped forward, its limbs jerking violently as it moved. Its face was a horrific mockery of human features, too many eyes, too many teeth. Its skin stretched so tight that it seemed as though it might tear at any moment. The creature's gaze bore into Alex, and for a moment, he could have sworn that it was smiling at him, its teeth glinting in the dim light. He could feel the coldness of its gaze, the emptiness that radiated from its very being. It wasn't human, it was something else, something ancient. "You're too late," the creature whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "The town is already ours. The people they're already ours." Alex felt a cold rush of panic flood his veins. What did that mean? Had they already taken the town? Had they already taken everyone? His mind raced, his thoughts spiraling into chaos as the realization set in. The people he had known, the faces he had trusted, they were gone. Replaced, rewritten by these things, these monsters. He had been too late to stop it. Too late to save anyone. "You should have stayed away," the creature hissed, its grin widening. "But now that you've seen us, now that you know you'll become part of us, you'll join the others." The words hit Alex like a blow to the chest, knocking the wind out of him. His heart hammered in his throat as the creatures closed in, surrounding him on all sides. He could feel their eyes on him, their presence suffocating him. His legs finally gave way, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. This was it. This was the end. But as the darkness closed in, something shifted. A flicker, a change. The air itself seemed to crackle with energy, and Alex felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. He wasn't sure what it was, but something inside him snapped. In that moment, he remembered something, a fleeting memory of a conversation with Peter, a conversation about strength, about survival, about fighting when there was no hope left. He wasn't ready to die. Not like this, not when he was so close to understanding the truth. With every ounce of strength he had left, Alex pushed himself to his feet. His vision swam, his legs wobbled, but he refused to fall. He couldn't fall, not yet. The creatures were closing in, their twisted forms moving faster now, their grins widening as they sensed his fear. But Alex's fear had begun to fade. A different feeling was growing inside him, something darker, something more dangerous. And in that moment, Alex understood. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for control. He wouldn't let them have him. He wouldn't let them take the town, take everyone he loved, take everything. The energy inside him surged, and with it, a new strength, a primal rage, flooded his body. He reached down into the darkness, into the very core of the terror that had been consuming him. And he fought back. It started as a whisper, a thought in his mind. But as he focused, it grew louder, the sound of his heartbeat, the thrum of his blood pumping through his veins. And then, a voice, not his own, but something deep inside him, something ancient, something that had always been there. "Leave this place." The words reverberated through the forest like thunder. The creatures froze, their twisted faces turning toward him, their empty eyes flickering with confusion. For a moment, everything stopped. The air itself seemed to pause, as if the world was holding its breath. And then, the creatures reacted. They hissed. The sound was like 1,000 nails scraping across a chalkboard, a noise that vibrated through Alex's very bones. The air crackled with energy, thick and oppressive, as the creatures lunged toward him, their limbs jerking and snapping as they moved. But Alex wasn't afraid anymore. He stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding. "You don't belong here." The creatures faltered, their eyes widened, their grins faltering, as though someone, was pushing them back. They were no longer the predators. They were the prey. Alex's body surged with power, with purpose, as he stepped into the clearing, pushing past the creatures that had once seemed invincible. His mind was clearer now, sharper. He could feel the energy pulsing through him, like an invisible force that was shaping the world around him. And with that, he understood. He wasn't just a victim. He was the key to stopping them. The creatures recoiled, their forms flickering like broken reflections in a shattered mirror. The air grew thick, the ground beneath Alex's feet shaking as the dark energy that had held the town in its grip began to falter. But they weren't gone, not yet. The battle wasn't over, but this time, Alex wasn't going to run. The forest was silent, the kind of silence that seeps into your bones, wrapping around your soul, and freezing you in place. Alex could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, suffocating him, as though the very air was thick with the remnants of something long dead. Something that had never truly left. He could still hear the distant, echoing whispers from the creatures that had surrounded him, their twisted voices lingering in the recesses of his mind. They weren't gone, not really. The darkness was still there, just beyond his reach, just out of sight, waiting for him to slip up, waiting for him to break. But Alex refused to break. Not now, not after everything he had been through. The last battle had left him battered, his body bruised, his mind shattered. But there was something else growing inside him now, a feeling. A force, an energy that he couldn't explain. It wasn't fear anymore, it wasn't even anger, it was something darker, something older. The creatures, the Skinwalkers, hadn't been defeated. Not by a long shot. They had been pushed back. But they would return, and when they did, they would be stronger, smarter. They would come for him. For the town, for everything. But Alex was no longer the frightened man who had stumbled into the forest months ago. He had learned something, something deep, something primal. He had discovered a truth that neither the Skinwalkers nor the dark forces that controlled them could ignore. The truth that had been buried within him all along. It was late at night when Alex ventured back into the town. The streets were deserted, empty. The houses, once full of life, now stood silent. Their windows dark, their doors sealed shut. The town felt dead, as though the pulse of life had been drained out of it, leaving only shadows and echoes behind. He walked down the empty road, his steps slow, deliberate. He could feel the weight of the darkness surrounding him, pressing in from all sides. The Skinwalkers were here. He knew it. They were always watching, always waiting. He could feel their eyes on him. Even now, as if they were just beyond his line of sight, hidden in the shadows. The air grew colder the further he walked, the breeze carrying a faint, unearthly scent that made his stomach turn. It smelled like decay, like something rotting beneath the earth, something long forgotten but never truly gone. Alex stopped in front of a house, his house. It hadn't been his home for months, but it was all that remained. The place where he had first uncovered the truth. The place where everything had started. But now, it felt foreign, empty, hollow. The front door was ajar, a faint light flickering from inside. The hair on the back of Alex's neck stood on end, and he felt a chill crawl up his spine. He had to go in. He had no choice. He stepped inside. The house was silent, save for the creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet. The walls seemed to close in around him, their once welcoming warmth now replaced by an oppressive cold that made his breath freeze in his throat. The air was thick with the scent of something foul, something stagnant, something that had been here far too long. Alex made his way through the house, his flashlight flickering as he moved from room to room. The familiar sights of his old home were distorted, warped, like reflections in a shattered mirror. The furniture was overturned, the pictures on the walls cracked and broken. There was an unnatural stillness to the place, like it had been abandoned for years rather than just months. And then he heard it. A low, guttural growl. It echoed through the house, coming from somewhere deep within the walls, as if the very bones of the house were groaning in pain. Alex froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The growl was followed by a sound that made his blood run cold, a faint scraping noise, like claws dragging across the floor. It was them. They were here. He wasn't alone. Alex's breath quickened, and he turned toward the source of the sound, his flashlight casting erratic shadows on the walls. He could feel the presence of someone, moving just out of sight, lurking in the dark corners of the house. The growl grew louder, more insistent, and Alex could feel the floor beneath him trembling as whatever was in the house with him began to move. He could hear it now, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy, echoing through the empty rooms. Alex took a step back, his mind racing. He had to get out. He had to leave. But as he turned to make his escape, a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Peter. Or rather, what had once been Peter. His face was twisted and contorted, his eyes hollow and empty, his body jerking unnaturally as he moved. The skin on his face was stretched too tight. The smile, if it could even be called that, widened to an impossible degree. His lips were cracked and dry. The skin around his eyes pulled so tight that they seemed to sink into the skull beneath. The thing wearing Peter's face stepped forward, its mouth opening wide, revealing rows of jagged, yellow teeth. The sound of its voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through Alex's chest like a knife. "You can't escape, Alex," it hissed. "You never could." Alex's heart raced as he backed away, his hand reaching for the knife at his side. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. He had faced monsters before. But this thing wearing Peter's face, was something else entirely. Something darker, something that felt like it had been around for centuries, feeding on the fear and pain of everyone it had touched. "I won't let you win," Alex shouted, his voice trembling but filled with defiance. "I won't be another one of you." The thing that was Peter laughed, a low, distorted sound that filled the room and made Alex's blood run cold. "You already are," it whispered. "You just don't know it yet." The ground beneath Alex's feet shook as the room seemed to warp and distort. The walls trembled, the ceiling cracked, and the floor splintered beneath him. A wave of energy, dark and oppressive, surged through the house, and Alex felt it, the weight of it, the power of it, the thing that had been growing inside him, inside the town, inside all of them. The Skinwalkers had won, and Alex was no longer sure if he could stop them. The air around him turned cold, and the shadows in the corners of the room began to move, to twist, to crawl toward him. The creature wearing Peter's face stepped forward, its grin widening, its eyes glinting with an ancient hunger. And as Alex took a step back, he realized with a sickening certainty that there was no escape. This was it, the end. And the worst part, Alex wasn't even sure he was still human anymore. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us here on Whispers in the Dark. Your support keeps the nightmares alive. And with your help, we can bring you even more chilling tales. Don't miss out, the darkness is waiting. Alex's journey was one of relentless terror, psychological torment, and a descent into an unimaginable world of horror. What began as a quiet, peaceful life in Winter's Hollow quickly spiraled into a nightmare as Alex uncovered the horrifying truth about the Skinwalkers, creatures that existed in plain sight, wearing the skins of those they preyed upon. With every new discovery, Alex was dragged further into the darkness, forced to confront not only the physical terror that stalked him but also the terrifying realization that the very people he loved and trusted had already been replaced. Through his journey, Alex discovered that the monsters weren't simply lurking in the shadows, they were embedded in the fabric of the world around him. They were disguised as friends, family, and familiar faces, blending in so seamlessly that he could hardly tell the difference. As Alex dug deeper into the mystery, he uncovered more than he could bear. The creatures weren't just an external threat, but part of something far larger, something ancient, something that had been around long before he even set foot in Winter's Hollow. Despite the odds, Alex didn't give up, even when the monsters grew closer, and the darkness threatened to consume everything around him. Alex held on to one vital truth: he wasn't completely powerless. It was this realization that gave him the strength to keep fighting. When the creatures finally closed in, Alex understood that it wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming the strength that had been taken from him. About confronting the monsters, both external and internal. Alex learned that the ultimate enemy wasn't the creatures themselves, but fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, and fear of facing the truth. It was his fear that had paralyzed him in the early stages of his journey. But as the story unfolded, Alex began to overcome his terror, not by running away from it, but by embracing it, understanding it, and using it to fuel his determination to face the darkness head-on. But even after Alex confronted the monsters and began to push back against the evil that had overtaken his town, he realized the truth: the battle was never fully over. The creatures would return, and the darkness was always waiting, ready to consume anyone who let their guard down. The horrors he had faced weren't just one-time encounters, they were part of a cycle that never truly ended. Even though Alex had fought back, even though he had survived, he would never be the same. The darkness had left its mark on him. The profound lesson from Alex's journey. So, what can we learn from Alex's harrowing experience? Beyond the literal horror and supernatural terror, Alex's story is a powerful metaphor for the struggles we all face in life. His journey represents the trials of confronting our fears, acknowledging the darkness that exists both in the world around us and within ourselves, and ultimately learning how to face those fears with strength and resilience. In our own lives, we may not encounter literal monsters or supernatural creatures, but we all face challenges that can feel just as terrifying, whether it's the loss of a loved one, the breakdown of relationships, the pressure of expectations, or the constant battle with self-doubt and anxiety. The fear of the unknown is a universal experience. The story of Alex's battle with the Skinwalkers teaches us that running away from our fears, avoiding or suppressing them, only gives them more power over us. It's only when we face our fears head-on, when we acknowledge them and understand their root cause, that we can start to free ourselves from their grip. Another lesson Alex's story offers is the idea of reclaiming our power in the face of overwhelming adversity. Too often, when life gets tough, we feel helpless, trapped, and unable to change our circumstances. But Alex's story shows us that even when the odds are stacked against us, we still have the ability to take control of our destiny. It's not about being fearless, it's about being brave enough to stand tall despite the fear. To push forward even when everything inside us screams to run. One of the most profound lessons is about the importance of resilience. Alex's ability to continue fighting, even when everything seemed hopeless, is a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure. In life, resilience is not just about bouncing back from hardship, it's about learning, growing, and evolving through the pain. Alex didn't return to the life he knew before the horrors began. He changed. He became someone who understood that the darkness was not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be fought with all his strength, courage, and willpower. How can we apply this lesson to our own lives? In our own lives, we can apply these lessons by first acknowledging the darkness we face, the fears, doubts, and challenges that often seem insurmountable. Instead of running away from them, we can choose to face them, to confront the monsters in our own minds. This doesn't mean we won't feel fear, but it means we choose not to let it control us. It's through confronting these fears that we find our true strength. We can also take inspiration from Alex's resilience. Life isn't easy, and it's filled with moments of despair. But the true test lies in how we respond to those moments. Like Alex, we must find the courage to rise up again and again, even when the world feels like it's falling apart. It's this resilience that enables us to grow stronger with each challenge we overcome. Finally, Alex's story teaches us about reclaiming our own power. When faced with seemingly impossible odds, we can choose to take control of our lives, our choices, and our responses. We don't have to be victims of circumstance. We have the ability to change the narrative, to rewrite our stories, and to take back what we've lost. Alex's journey may have ended for now, but his story is far from over. The lessons learned along the way, about fear, resilience, and taking control, are lessons that we can all carry forward into our own lives. And just as Alex's battle against the darkness inspired him to push forward, let his story inspire you to face your own challenges with courage and strength. If Alex's story resonated with you, if you found strength in his journey, then please take a moment to subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. Your support helps us continue telling these powerful stories, and it gives us the motivation to bring you more content that will inspire, challenge, and keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't miss out on the next chapter. Together, we can continue to face the darkness and come out stronger on the other side. Subscribe now and join us for more chilling tales, deeper insights, and the kind of stories that will leave you questioning what's real. The darkness is waiting, and we can't wait to share more with you.